park was quiet that November morning, the kind of silence that comes only after the last leaves have fallen. The river moved slowly, like an old song played too many times, and mist clung to the water as though reluctant to let go. At the far end of the path, beneath a leaning oak tree, stood a wooden bench, old, weathered, and familiar. Arthur Hayes came every day to that bench. Rain, snow, or sun, he would be there by 8 in the morning, a small paper bag of breadcrumbs in his wrinkled hands and a wool cap pulled low over his white hair. The pigeons knew him by now. They would wait nearby, tilting their heads curiously, ready for their breakfast. He lowered himself onto the bench with a soft grunt. The wood creaked under his weight, the same sound it had made for nearly 50 years, the same sound he used to joke about with her. "Someday this bench will give up before we do," he had once said. She'd laughed, her laugh like wind through spring leaves. "We'll see, Artie. We'll see who lasts longer." That was before her heart gave out one February night quietly, as though she'd simply drifted into sleep and forgotten to return. It had been 8 years now, and still Arthur felt her absence beside him, a space that no sound, no person, no morning could fill. He took out a piece of bread and scattered it before the pigeons. "There you go, greedy devils," he muttered, smiling faintly. "You lot never miss a day, do you?" The birds fluttered and pecked, their tiny feet clicking against the frost-covered ground. For a long moment Arthur watched them, and then his gaze drifted to the empty spot beside him. "You'd scold me if you saw how much bread I waste," he murmured. "Said I spoil them too much. But what else am I supposed to talk to, huh?" The wind whispered through the trees, a sound that could almost have been her sigh. Everywhere he looked, the park was changing. New benches had been installed near the playground. Young couples came with their phones, their laughter loud but empty somehow. Even the old willow tree by the riverbank, the one that had shaded them on summer afternoons, was gone now, cut down after a storm. Only this bench, their bench, remained untouched. Arthur reached into his coat pocket and took out a folded photograph. It was creased and faded, the corners worn thin from years of touching. In it, a young woman with soft eyes and a polka-dot dress smiled beside a younger Arthur, his arm wrapped proudly around her shoulders. Behind them, the same river shimmered in the background, eternal and unbothered by time. He sighed. "You know, Mary," he whispered, "the world's moving faster than I can keep up. Everything's newer, brighter, louder. They build, they tear down, they build again. But nobody stops to just sit anymore." He tucked the photo back into his pocket and leaned against the bench. A faint ache ran through his chest, the kind of ache that wasn't quite pain but wasn't comfort either. And then he heard it. A voice, small and uncertain. "Mister, you dropped this." Arthur turned. Standing beside the bench was a boy, maybe 10 or 11, holding a small paper bag. The breadcrumbs he hadn't realized had fallen. The boy's clothes were too big, his hair a bit of a mess, and his eyes, blue, sharp, curious, reminded Arthur of himself when he was that age. "Oh. Thank you, lad," Arthur said, taking the bag. "You've got good eyes," the boy shrugged. "I come here too. My mom says it's quiet enough to think." Arthur smiled faintly. "She's right about that. Thinking's a rare thing these days." The boy sat down on the other end of the bench, carefully, like someone sitting beside a sacred object. "My name's Noah," he said after a pause. "What's yours?" "Arthur," he replied. "Arthur Hayes." Noah looked at the river. "Do you come here every day?" Arthur nodded. "Every day since, well, a long time. My wife and I used to sit right here." "Oh," Noah said softly. "Did she stop coming?" Arthur's smile faltered. He looked toward the water. "Something like that, son." For a long time they sat without speaking. The pigeons moved between them, unbothered by the weight of time or memory. The river kept flowing, indifferent to grief. And for the first time in many years, Arthur felt that perhaps, just perhaps, in silence didn't have to be lonely. The next morning came wrapped in fog. The river seemed to breathe, its silver mist curling up and over the pathway like ghostly hands reaching for the sky. Arthur Hayes shuffled down the familiar path with his walking cane, tapping rhythmically on the cobblestones. He liked the sound, steady, certain, something that didn't change. When he reached the bench, he wasn't surprised to see the boy there first. Noah sat cross-legged, a notebook open on his lap, pencil tapping against the page as he stared at the water. Arthur gave a low chuckle. Well, I'll be damned. You beat me to it, kid. Noah grinned. Morning, Mr. Arthur. I'm writing something. Arthur lowered himself onto the bench, the same creak greeting him like an old friend. Writing, huh? What kind of something? A story, Noah said. My teacher says we're supposed to write about someone who inspires us. Arthur raised an eyebrow. And who'd that be? Noah looked up, eyes wide and innocent. You, maybe. Arthur blinked, caught off guard. For a moment, words failed him. Something that didn't happen often. Me, son, you don't even know me. Noah shrugged. You feed birds and talk nice. That's enough, Arthur laughed softly. That's a mighty low bar for inspiration, don't you think? But the boy's sincerity made something in him ache. There had been a time when he had spoken gently, too. Before life had hardened him, before time had turned his voice into gravel. Tell you what, Arthur said, settling back. If you're going to write about me, you might as well get the story straight. He pulled the folded photograph from his pocket and handed it to the boy. The picture trembled slightly in his wrinkled hand. That's my Mary. Noah studied it carefully. She looks kind. She was, Arthur said quietly. She had this way of making you believe the world wasn't as cruel as it seemed. She taught music at the elementary school, sang like an angel. I never could carry a tune, but she didn't care. He smiled, but his eyes were far away, fixed on something only he could see. She used to drag me out here every Sunday morning. Said the river helped her think. I'd bring the paper, she'd bring her tea. We'd just sit. Didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. You reach a point in marriage where silence says more than words. Noah listened, completely still, as if afraid to break the spell. Arthur leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then one winter she started getting tired. Said it was nothing, just age catching up. But I knew something wasn't right. His voice softened, cracking like old wood. By the time she went to the doctor, it was too late. Heart was too weak. She passed one night while I was making tea. He fell quiet. The pigeons fluttered near his boots, waiting. I thought I'd follow her soon after, he said at last. But I didn't, I just kept coming here instead. Because this bench, he patted the worn wood, it still remembers her. Noah didn't speak. He just nodded, small and solemn like a grown man trapped in a boy's body. Then carefully he handed the photograph back. Can I draw her, he asked. Arthur blinked again. Draw her? Yeah, for my story, so people know who you're talking about. Arthur smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides tears just behind it. You go right ahead, son. As the boy began sketching, Arthur watched his small hands move and steady, patient, alive. Something stirred in him then. Something warm and painful all at once. For the first time in years, someone was helping him remember, not by looking back, but by giving the past a new face. When Noah finished, he turned the notebook toward Arthur. It wasn't perfect. The proportions were off, the lines too sharp. But the spirit of it was there. The same soft eyes, the same tilt of her smile. Arthur took a slow breath. You've got a good eye, Noah. You've seen her just right. The boy smiled shyly. Thanks, I think she would have liked you. Arthur laughed softly. She did, son. She really did. The river shimmered under the weak sun. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring, their echoes carrying across the water, a sound both sad and peaceful. Arthur looked at the boy beside him, a child too young to understand loss, yet old enough to feel it. And for the first time in a long while, the emptiness on that bench didn't feel quite so empty anymore. Snow came earlier than usual that year. It drifted down in lazy flakes, soft as ash, coating the trees, the path, and the old bench where Arthur and Noah sat each morning. The park had emptied for the season. Only the bravest souls dared to wander near the frozen river now, but Arthur didn't miss a single day, and neither, to his quiet surprise, did Noah. The boy arrived bundled in a red scarf, his breath puffing clouds into the cold air. You're early, Arthur said, smiling under his wool cap. My mom had to work, Noah replied. Said I could stay here as long as I don't fall in the river. Arthur chuckled. Smart woman, he handed Noah a thermos. Hot chocolate. Mary's recipe. Still make it every winter. Noah took it eagerly, sipping from the steaming lid. It's good. What's in it? Arthur winked. Secrets, mostly. The boy laughed. That bright, innocent laugh that seemed to melt the frost from the air. For a moment, Arthur could almost hear Mary laughing with him. her voice layered beneath the boy's like a memory harmonizing with the present. They sat quietly for a while, watching the river crawl under its thin shell of ice. Arthur tapped his cane on the ground. "You know, Noah," he said, "you remind me of myself when I was your age, curious, stubborn, and always asking too many questions." "I don't ask that many." Arthur raised a brow. "Son, you asked me what's in hot chocolate." They both laughed again. After a while, the laughter faded into silence. Not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Arthur reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. "Here," he said. "What's this?" "An old harmonica. Mary gave it to me on our first Christmas. I used to play it by the fire, though I was terrible at it." Noah turned it over in his mittened hands, eyes wide. "Can I try?" Arthur nodded. "Go on, but if you wake the pigeons, I'm blaming you." The boy pressed his lips to the cold metal and blew gently. The sound that came out was thin, shaky, like a whisper caught in a dream, but it filled the empty park with life. Arthur closed his eyes. For just a heartbeat, he wasn't an old man anymore. He was 20 again, sitting by the fire with Mary humming along, the world young and wide and full of promise. When the note faded, Arthur opened his eyes. "Not bad," he said softly. Noah grinned. "Maybe you can teach me." Arthur looked out at the river. "Maybe you can teach me too." "Teach you what?" "How to start again." The boy didn't quite understand, but he nodded anyway. They fell into a rhythm after that. Every morning, rain or snow, they met at the bench. Sometimes they talked about school, sometimes about Mary, sometimes about nothing at all. Arthur began bringing old photographs and Noah brought his drawings. They traded memories like gifts. One day, Noah arrived with a question that caught Arthur off guard. "Mr. Arthur," he said, "if you could go back, like really go back, would you change anything?" Arthur's gaze lingered on the river for a long moment before he spoke. "Once I would have said yes. I'd have taken her to the doctor sooner. I'd have spent more evenings holding her hand instead of reading the paper, but," he sighed, "if I changed those days, I'd lose what came after. The lessons, the love, even this." He gestured toward the boy. "And that's not something I'd trade, not even for more time." Noah nodded slowly, his young face thoughtful. "So you don't regret anything?" Arthur smiled sadly. "Everyone regrets something, son. The trick is learning to forgive yourself for it." They watched the river in silence again. A heron landed on the far bank, tall and graceful, its reflection trembling in the cold water. The world felt fragile and eternal all at once. Before they left that day, Noah pressed the harmonica back into Arthur's hand. "You should play it again," he said. "Mary would want that." Arthur looked at him, really looked, and felt something loosen inside his chest. Maybe she would want that. Maybe she already was. That night, for the first time in 8 long years, Arthur sat by the fire and raised the harmonica to his lips. The tune was clumsy, off-key, and trembling, but it was alive. And outside, the snow fell softly against the window like applause from ghosts. The thaw came late that year. By March, the snow had finally surrendered to the first hints of spring. Muddy grass, dripping branches, and the smell of wet earth returning to life. The river, once trapped under a crust of ice, now whispered softly again, carrying bits of broken branches and brown leaves out toward the horizon. Arthur Hayes stood by the water's edge, cane planted firmly in the mud. The bench waited behind him, worn smooth by time and by 2 lifetimes of sitting side by side. The air felt heavy with change. Noah hadn't come that morning. It was the first time in weeks that the boy hadn't appeared, and Arthur tried not to admit to himself how empty it made him feel. He sat down slowly, watching the water glisten in the early sun. He was about to scatter crumbs for the pigeons when something caught his eye. A flash of white against the brown current. It moved lazily toward the shore, twisting and turning until it lodged against a half-buried stone. Arthur frowned, leaning forward with effort. It looked like a letter. Grumbling at his own curiosity, he took his cane, hooked the envelope, and drew it toward him. The paper was old, yellowed slightly, sealed with a wax mark that had long since cracked. His name was written across the front in faded ink, Arthur Hayes. His heart stuttered. The handwriting was unmistakable, gentle, looping, the way she used to write her grocery lists and love notes. "Mary," he whispered. His fingers trembled as he broke the brittle seal. The paper inside was soft and fragile, and the scent, faint lavender, hit him like a memory. He began to read. My dearest Artie, if you're reading this, then time has done what it always does, carried us where it must. I never wanted you to find this while I was alive because I knew you'd spend your days worrying instead of living. You always loved to fix things, even the ones that couldn't be fixed. If the river brought this back to you, then maybe it's trying to tell you something, that nothing truly leaves us, not even love. I want you to promise me you'll keep coming to our bench, feed the birds, talk to the river, tell it everything. Because when you do, I'll be listening. And if someday you find someone who reminds you of what we had, someone who brings you peace, don't turn away from it. You've given enough of your life to grief. Let joy have what's left. With all the love the world could hold. Mary Arthur's hands shook as he finished. The words blurred. His tears fell onto the page, spreading the ink like watercolor. For a long while he didn't move. The river murmured softly beside him, and the pigeons landed nearby, tilting their heads curiously. He looked up toward the sky and exhaled. I hear you, Mary, he said hoarsely. After all these years, I still hear you. He folded the letter carefully, pressed it to his heart, and closed his eyes. Memories flooded him. Her laughter, the warmth of her hand, the scent of summer in her hair. The ache that had lived in his chest for years began to loosen just a little. A sound pulled him from his thoughts, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. He turned and saw Noah running toward him, cheeks flushed from the chill, clutching something in his hand. Mr. Arthur, you won't believe it. My story got picked for the school fair. Arthur smiled through his tears. That's wonderful, lad. They want me to read it on stage. It's about you and Miss Mary. Mom says she'll take me, but I want you to come too. Arthur's heart swelled. You sure you want an old man like me up there? Noah nodded firmly. You're the main character. Arthur laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. He looked at the boy, then at the river, then down at the letter in his hand. All right, son, he said softly. Let's give her one more story. They sat together on the bench again, the young and the old side by side. The sun broke through the clouds, scattering light over the water. The river flowed on, carrying the past, the present, and everything in between, and for the first time since she'd gone, Arthur felt that the world wasn't taking from him anymore. It was returning something,